Am I being unfair on Russia or anything?
No, as I say, sitting here listening to the discussion and the points from the various speakers, I find myself sort of looking at it from the outside. I see it very differently from sitting in Moscow and what's happening in Eastern Europe. In so much as Western Europeans are talking about efficiency, energy reduction, CO2, whereas where we are in the developing world, it's all about production, increasing, working the deposits we already have, developing traditional energy sources, hydrocarbons, gas, oil, coal, and all of these things have been either untouched in Soviet times or they're huge expanses of land, and they particularly are going full force to develop the things that they already have. At the same time, I mentioned before, they have a broader energy policy whereby they realize they're not going to be able to rely on hydrocarbons forever. And so they are developing nuclear, particularly, together with Kazakhstan, which has enormous deposits of uranium. And hydropower, too. The hydropower potential of Siberia is enormous. The problem with Siberia is that it is so far away, transmitting that power. But there's talk of like superconducting electric cables which would overcome that as a technological solution to that, which might happen. In terms of Russia-China, I was at a speech that Schröder, the former Chancellor of Germany, gave in Berlin a few years ago, just after he'd been appointed chairman of Nordgas, the pipeline that runs from Yamal to the German border. And he was saying that a window of opportunity to engage with Russia exists and that Europe should get on with it, because Russia is a cornucopia of everything you could possibly need for an economy, from rare earth metals to power to consumer markets, high tech as well, and things that they're good at. However, it seems to me the European Union is very fragmented and has unable to engage in Russia. And then Putin stood up in Munich in 2007 and basically laid down the law and said, look, unless you do something to work with us, we're going to go and find some new friends. And from where I sit now, that window of opportunity has closed, and the Kremlin has turned from the west to the east, and now they're fully engaged with China. And for them, it's not a natural choice, in so much as that the Chinese and the Russians actually don't get on very well. There's a big cultural clash there. It's very much a marriage of convenience. But it's been said that Russia and China is the best synergy on the planet. You know, everything China needs in terms of inputs, raw materials, energy, Russia has. And conversely, the Chinese offers a massive market to Russia, and at the same time, they can finance everything. They've got buckets of money. And from 2004, this started to happen and happen rapidly. I'm sure you know the name Mikhail Hodorkovsky, who's about to be convicted for another 15 years or whatever. However, he was partly jailed because he wanted to build an oil pipeline from his fields in western Siberia to Daking in the northwest China provinces, and the Kremlin considered this to be foreign policy. However, that pipeline has now been completed. It went online about a month ago, built by the Kremlin. And it shows there's been a complete, total about-face as far as the Kremlin is concerned with China. And they've just signed off for a gas deal as well, and these two pipelines represent geopolitical marriage as far as I'm concerned. And so much as once you build a pipe, you know, you can't stop delivering it because you don't get any money if you don't. But this is not just Russia and China, this synergy. I mean, the Russians have also started moving into Africa in a big way, and they're competing directly with the Chinese there. They're all of them are all over Central Asia. And in Moscow, it starts to raise the question, does the East need the West at all? I mean, they don't need it for financing. They don't need it for the markets. Are significant, but they have significant markets elsewhere. And more we're seeing the BRIC countries come together as a political unit, as well as an economic unit. For instance, Russia's leading investment bank just tied up with India's leading investment bank specifically to do project finance, raw material infrastructure investments in Africa. And there's more and more of that going on. And then you listen to the debates here in Europe, and the fragmentation. I mean, the energy, of course, Germany's now going to receive gas through Nord Stream, which is going to bump up its supply from interest directly, thanks to Schroeder. But at the same time, the Italians, they receive, I mean, Europe as a whole receives about a third of its gas from Russia. But someone like the Italians, coupled with the Algerian gas they get, which again is a joint venture with Gazprom, is 80% of gas is basically coming from a Russian joint venture. And so that they have their own agenda too. And you look at someone like Ukraine, who's been desperately trying to move closer to Europe and do an energy partnership, but it's not going anywhere. The same in Belarus. I was there, the Deputy Prime Minister stood up at a conference and said, you know, this Eastern Partnership we have with the EU, you haven't even got an investment mandate, so you can't even release the cash for the technical advice you're supposed to give us, you know, the precursor to transformation. And the same month, the Chinese turn up and promise $16 billion. And, you know, it's going on like this. It just seems to be very, very slow, whereas the East are very dynamic and fast-moving, and the people are directly doing deals. And the energy, as I said before, the whole map's being remade as ends its subsidies, puts everybody on market prices, remakes relationships. I don't see it as a war. As I say, I think Moscow's made it very clear that they are committed partners to Europe, but on a contractual basis. They want customers. They need to sell their gas. They want the money that brings in. And moreover, if you look at the energy infrastructure they're building, and at the moment, most of the gas goes through Ukraine, through the Druzhba pipeline. And Nord Stream will give a second pipeline, and South Stream is supposed to give a third. At the same time, they've got LNG plants in Sakhalin already that serves Asia, and now they're launching a plant or a plan to build an LNG plant in the west, which would then commoditize the gas, because then you get away from this problem of tying yourself to customers with pipelines. And once you have LNG, it becomes a commodity like oil in so much as it goes on a market and frees you. And in that sense, it gives the Kremlin flexibility, because they can use it as a weapon in the sense that they can cut you off in the way that they can't cut you off if there's a pipeline. But at the same time, they're very much focused on the revenue it brings in. And, you know, Gazprom, even in Soviet times, even in the depths of the Cold War, continued to send gas west. The only reason they cut the Ukrainians off was that they didn't pay their bill. And provided you pay your bill, they will continue to send you the gas. It seems that the gas supplies are separated from the politics, and they realized that if they started using it as a political weapon, cutting people off for political reasons, that's the beginning of the end, or at least that's enough to, you know, to lead to a war. So in that sense, I think it's the Kremlin's very commercial now. You know, they don't do diplomacy, they do contracts, deals. That's how they think these days.